Place. So nice to see all of you this morning. Welcome. You know, there's a traditional way of doing Mother's Day, and I think that often we find that we sort of will slip into that and let it always be about mothers and the feminine face of God and the various things that we tend to associate with Mother's Day. And from the very beginning, I have wanted to do this particular talk in a different way. I have wanted us to look at what we're doing in an altogether different way. And I think once we're done, you will say that I have succeeded beyond our wildest expectations. So Desiree had us singing this morning, M is for the many things she gave me, O means only that she's growing old. T is for, but I'm not. You understand? My daughter's maturing, but I'm not growing older. T is for the tears she shed to save me. H is for her heart of purest gold. E is for her eyes with love light shining. R means right, and right she'll always be. Put them all together, they spell mother, a word that means the world to me, until it doesn't. So we aren't going there this morning. You know, over the weekend, Linda Anderson sent me a text, and it was a joke that's floating around online, and it says, you know, always be careful when you're friends with a minister or you're anywhere near a minister's home, because there isn't anything in the life of a minister that won't someday show up in a talk. So I want you to get ready, all right? This morning we're doing a different kind of metaphysical interpretation. And for those of us that grew up in the 60s, I am reasonably sure that you will remember this.
Mamma mia, that's some species.
Got spicy meatballs, Jack. Sorry. Take 28.
And action. Mamma mia, that's a spicy meatball.
Cut.
What was the matter with that?
The accent.
Huh?
Cut. Cut.
Micey, ballsy.
Cut. Take 59.
And action.
Sometimes you eat more than you should. And when it's spicy besides, Mamma Mia, do you need Alka-Seltzer? Alka-Seltzer can help unstuff you, relieve the acid indigestion, and help make you your old self again.
Mamma mia, that's a spicy meatball.
Cut. Okay. Let's break for lunch.
We're going to metaphysically interpret that this morning. So as they put up the slide of the female in this ad, we find our mother, right? Patient, serving, ever present. There were 79 takes of that. Think how many plates of meatballs she had to hand to this guy. So let's begin with the mother image, the female side of God. Joseph Campbell in The Power of Myth tells us that the feminine image, as in the goddess and earth mother, is somewhere in the neighborhood of 6,000 years old. It's been around a very, very long time. We talk of Mother Earth. In Egypt, we have the goddess Nut, who's the mother of the heavens. This is the mother of the whole heavenly sphere. Ancient people drew a correlation between fertility and the goddess because of our roots in agriculture and reproduction. The goddess religion got pretty much undone by Greek thought as time moved on, and the development of the Iron Age. Instruments, weapons, tools. We moved from an agrarian base that was multiple goddesses to one god, a more sort of intellectual god, a god more removed from the people. Now, if we take a giant leap forward, and I mean giant, it's probably 2,000 years or so, I want to talk about the fact that even though we aren't thought of as goddesses anymore, particularly We women have maintained more or less the aura of caregiver, nurturer, home builder. And I want to look at that for a moment in our own unity tradition. In 1881, Mary Carolyn Myrtle Page, co-founder of the Unity Movement, married Charles Fillmore. And prior to that time, she was a school teacher. Now, Charles was a real estate speculator. He didn't start out in this tradition. And because of that, they kept moving around as he chased real estate boom after real estate boom. And over time, the Fillmores moved to Kansas City. Now, somewhere in that period, Myrtle had discovered E.B. Weeks. She had discovered the philosophy that we can heal ourselves. She had been sick always, sickly always. And they became devotees, if you will, of Ralph Waldo Emerson, who was a transcendentalist. Now, the Fillmores wanted to share the exciting spiritual teachings that they had learned, but they didn't want to start a church. Charles was known for saying, there are too many religions, there are too many ministers, we don't need another one. We want to share the philosophy. So they, rather than start a church, they started a magazine. All right? The first issue of Modern Thought came out in 1889, and it is still published under the name of Unity Magazine. I couldn't find a copy, or else I'd be waving it around, just so you know, but there is still the same, it's not the same, but there is a Unity Magazine. All right? In 1890, Charles and Myrtle formed a prayer group that is now Silent Unity, that's open 24/7, 365. You can always call it. They will always help you. And to those of you that have bulletins in your hand, I would draw your attention to it. Would you get it out for a moment? Everyone who has a bulletin, please look on the back. In bold, says Silent Unity is available to you 24/7 to pray with you. All right? That's the same Silent Unity that was started by Charles and Myrtle in 1890. It began in their living room of the house, where they would write letters and pray for other people. This was before the invention of the telephone. In 1924, they began publication of the Daily Word. Daily Word, which we still read from in our services. And if you talk to people and strangers on the street and you say, I'm with Unity, and they'll give you a blank look because chances are they haven't heard of us, you will say, you know, we're the people that put out the Daily Word. And almost invariably, people say, oh, yeah, my grandmother had that, or my aunt had that, or my mother had that. The Daily Word has been widespread and to this day is used throughout the world as a spiritual guide on a day-to-day basis. The classes that were taught by the Fillmores, they grew into Unity Worldwide Ministries, about 600 churches worldwide, study groups. The reason Tim isn't here is that he's on the board of Unity Worldwide Ministries, and he's back at Unity Village right now for board meetings. So we have a strong link to that whole teaching component of Unity. The farm, they lived in Kansas City, they bought property outside of Kansas City, and the ever real estate savvy Charles Fillmore established a 1,200-acre farm that was developed to grow produce for their vegetarian restaurant in Kansas City. It's a fully incorporated town to this day, and it's the world headquarters of Unity Movement, and it's known as Unity Village. Now, I tell you all of this, so I want to refresh your history, and I want all of you to understand that we're not Unity and Marin spinning out here in space without all of this history and without all of the things that go into supporting the movement. I tell you this because the house that Myrtle and Charles lived in on the farm was known as the Arches, was built as a weekend retreat. They thought they'd live in Kansas City, that they'd come to the farm on the weekends. One thing led to another. They loved living out on the farm so much that this became the house where our founders lived. This was the dining room where things were edited, and this was the living room where prayer groups met, and it was all in the middle of Unity Village, and it was a typical house in every way except it didn't have a kitchen. No kitchen. Do you know what that means? That means no cooking. That means no planning. That means no dirty dishes. That doesn't mean, oh dear, it's 5 o'clock, what am I going to serve? There was no kitchen. Okay, so what's going on here? No cooking. Charles's mother lived with Charles and Myrtle always, and she traveled with them always, and she had the house right next door. It turns out that history tells us that Mother did the laundry, cleaned the house, was the go-to person for the boys. They had 3 sons, one of whom died early, so actually 2. All right? So now it's like, whoa, this is getting better and better. None of that stuff. And very quickly, as the movement grew, Myrtle developed a staff. She created people who helped write all those letters and edited all those articles and did all that paperwork. Now, mind you, I'm not here to say that we shouldn't honor Myrtle. I think we absolutely should. But remember, in the traditional role of women, Myrtle didn't do it. She was busy founding a movement. And so she was a businesswoman much more than she had the traditional role. For those of us who have made the clear choice to be homemakers, please understand, I honor that choice. Truly, it is an amazing, wonderful thing and every bit as important as business. But I think that on this Mother's Day, it's very important to think about all of the other things that women are. It's just as important as the feminine face of God. And so now we'll bring up the slide that is representative of our male face of God. Here's our guy from the ad. You'll notice throughout the ad, I wouldn't call him passive. I was trying to figure out, because he's always eating and he's the one talking, and it is sort of centering around him, which isn't sort of a way that we do when we believe in the traditional male face of God, removed from us. And I thought, well, let's go to the history first. God showed up as a male about the same time that Christianity was developed. Somewhere along the line with the Iron Age, and the king, Constantine, made Christianity a state religion at the end of the 4th century. And God became male. We moved away from the goddess to God. There was Greek philosophy very rampant at the time that told us intellectual mind, which is more thought of as a male tradition, is good, and the more female body tradition, bad. So again, up with the male, down with the female. You can begin to see how the transition from goddess to God happened. We won't belabor the story here, but I want to say that here we have a figure who is served. He's running the show. Remember the woman's face. No matter what's going on, she's pious. Clearly, she lived to serve, right? And traditional religion for many years was the same way. I grant you women have begun to filter into leadership, yes. But in most traditions, the men still dominate. They keep trying. They're trying to say, no, we really don't dominate. Come on, it just includes us. I was always told that when they said men throughout the Episcopal Church, they really meant men and women, because the word men, M-E-N, is in the word woman, and so therefore, 20, 30 years ago, they were still teaching us that woman, the word, didn't have a role of its own. But in these traditions, the traditional does not quite get it right. The Methodists can't figure out their LGBTQ relations. The Episcopalians are accused of being Catholic light. The Roman Catholics can't solve their problems with women and pedophiles. I'm not saying that women can fix it, for the traditions are deeply embedded in all of the theology. But isn't it a shame what gender has become in traditional religions? And then that leads me to our third slide. Okay? And when I think of God, it looks something like this. It's fizzy. It doesn't have the glass, obviously. I think it's all over everywhere. And for me, it will have sparkles. It'll probably have rhinestones and diamonds all through it. To me, that's what God is. And in metaphysics, God, as we have moved from women to men to God, is now power and light, bubbly, everywhere present. So how did we get here? It all began in the 18th century with the Enlightenment. By the end of the 16th century, we had the development of train travel. We had all of the development of technology. Think industrialization. We produced an entirely different kind of society. The process of westernization spread throughout the world, and with it came secularization. For the first time, we all developed an independence from God at all. Prior to the Enlightenment, and here I wanted to just run quickly through the different gods. If you lived in a cave, God was lightning and power and thunderstorms. Then you had the goddess. As we developed agriculture, there was the goddess. Then as the Iron Age came, then you had the god male. And now with some great liberties, we're moving on to enlightenment. No matter what God looked like, we depended on God for everything. If we got sick, God must be displeased. If our crops flourished, God must be happy with us. God was this extra sort of superhuman being, someone that we could anger, that we could plead with, that we could beg to. And with the development of modern technology, we realized that science could cure illness. We weren't at the will of some God. We could be enlightened intellectually. There were political and social revolutions, and all of us changed how we thought about God. Over time, rather than God, all of us became dominated by what I would call the myth of progress. We could achieve great things, and we didn't need God to get things done. So God became light, power, love, everywhere present, and that's where we find ourselves today. You know, for 4,000 years, our view of God has constantly adapted to whatever we needed. And more of us are finding that the God of our fathers no longer works for us. The theologian Paul Tillich believed that spiritual belief is necessary for humankind, and the reason we need to believe in something spiritual is because of a deep-seated anxiety over the fact that we are afraid of being extinct. We see ourselves growing older. We see our universe aging, and now even more than usual, we have climate change. We have people talking about the end of the world as we know it, and that creates, whether we know it or not, a deep anxiety in all of us, a hunger that is only filled by spiritual belief. Now, Tillich blamed all of this on a personal God. This was a God who periodically intervened in our lives, kind of diddled with it, changed it, didn't help, sometimes did. And I think we're shifting again. We're shifting to a God that is the very ground of our being. I wonder if this amazing, sparkly, everywhere present, being God, isn't fundamental to our emotions of courage, love, absence of fear, all of the things that we are trying to establish and talk about. Always in the past, we have created, as needed, new symbols of God to focus on our spirituality. We inevitably create a faith for ourselves because faith cultivates in us a sense of wonder. It cultivates in us the amazing belief of the significance of life, no matter what else is going on. And history shows us that as human beings, we cannot endure emptiness and desolation. We will ultimately fill the vacuum with something. We will ultimately create a new focus of our being. So this morning I want to close with a little bit of Rumi. Do not feel lonely. The entire universe is inside us. Stop acting so small. We are the universe in ecstatic motion. Let us set our lives on fire. Seek out those who fan our flames. If we let ourselves be silently drawn by the stronger pull of what we really love, it will not lead us astray. The final slide.
Mamma mia, that's a spicy meatball.
Oops. And so it is. Just when you think you've got it all figured out, the front of the stove falls off.